So I'll go into the timeline now. Like I said, we don't really need to do too much of a description. He was with a Boy Scout group. We kind of understood what he was wearing.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump into the timeline. It was Friday 19th, July 1991 at about 6 p.m. So Jared was falling behind his fellow scout group on a hike to the summit of the 11,000-foot Mount San Gorgonio. Another group of hikers that was going up the summit trail spotted that Jared was straggling behind and notified the scout leader at the mountain summit. Scout leader was an experienced hiker and said he was going to pick Jared up on the way down. When the leader finally decided to descend the mountain, Jared was nowhere to be seen. So there's a couple different reports of how this went down. Mm-hmm. The most common one is that he was struggling to keep up, and he was told to just sit and wait on the trail because it was too difficult, and that they would then pick him back up on the way down to their camp.
Okay.
What it seems like is that he kind of wasn't just sitting in one spot. And I think that's what inevitably led to this issue. So we'll get into that a little bit.
So the group left this child by himself on the trail?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that just seems, I don't know. If
it seems weird, but here's where I'm going to play devil's advocate. Because I think it's very easy to immediately chastise the scout leader. And I'm not saying he's right either. I'm just saying this, from what it seems like and all I've looked up, so all trails I looked up has it listed that there's a couple trails that go to the summit. They're all around 19 miles each.
Yeah.
They're well marked. There's a couple that say there's different turnoffs you can take that aren't marked, but they're visible, well marked. And although it's a long distance, a lot of people do it. So it's kind of like a normal trail in a heavily trafficked, I say like the touristy areas of a national park where there's just tons of people everywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think to myself in my head, if I have a group of kids, I'm trying to get to the summit, there's one that's just not going to make it. I can either force them to get to the summit and have issues or say, hey, wait right here, sit down, eat some food. We're going to come right back. We're just right up here. We're going to come right back. I could see that happening and not being something that's terribly incorrect to do, I guess is the way to say it. I don't know. That's just me playing devil's advocate.
And I mean, you obviously with 6 kids know better than I would, and he is 13 years old.
I don't know about that. But yeah, that's what I thought too. He's 13 years old. He's a teenager. I have a daughter that is 13 years old that I would trust, on a trail, to be honest, a well-marked trail, to say if she's like, I'm going to go on a quick hike up and down to camp, I don't necessarily think I'd say no. If I was in Colorado or something like that.
I guess, my concern always is I'm almost more worried about some of the other humans out on the trail versus, a 13-year-old falling or, an animal attack. That would be my biggest concern in leaving a child alone on a pretty highly trafficked trail is who knows who's going to come across, that child. So that would be my concern, but
I will agree with you on that. I'd say my one caveat to me playing the devil's advocate is I don't like that he was by himself. If anything, you want to have someone else with them, even if it's just another kid, another peer that's behind, so that's just not somebody by themselves. Because that's usually on this show, the history of the show, when do we get in trouble? It's usually when it's just a single person doing something.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I think if I was going to take a Cub Scout group up into the mountains, I probably would want at least one other adult with me. Just, what if somebody gets injured and someone needs to, they can't move, and someone would need to go down to, the ranger station, and you're not going to want to leave an injured child up on a mountain summit by themselves. So,
Yes.
I think having 2 adults, if you were doing that, would be
and look at the
best
time
thing to do.
frame. And we can say this now because this was the 90s.
Yeah.
And we used to be able to do whatever we wanted in the 90s. I seriously, I was only how old were we? Jeez, I don't even know.
91,
7 years old.
Yeah.
I was riding my bike for miles all over Milwaukee. We had no phones. We didn't check in. It was make sure you get home at night. That was standard fare. All my friends did it. That was normal. Nowadays, my parents would have got thrown in jail for negligence. But back then, that's how everybody operated. You rode your bikes everywhere. So I think of it, that mindset at that time too, is we're on this one trail. It's a single trail that goes up and down to camp. Wait right here. We're going to be right back.
Yeah.
Not a huge deal. So we'll move on from this. That I just want to set the context there of kind of the time frame, what was happening. So as soon as the troop leader realized that Jared had disappeared, he accompanied his 5 other scouts back to base camp and hiked about 5 miles in the dark to go get help. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies, along with search and rescue teams from as far away as Sierra Madre and San Dimas, began searching a 130 square mile area of San Gorgonio wilderness, a rocky, tree-lined terrain. Within 3 days, their search was focused on a 6 square mile area, where a footprint believed to match one of Jared's high-top tennis shoes was found. Searchers also discovered beef jerky and candy wrappers believed to have been dropped by the scout, and most importantly, his camera was located. Law enforcement had the images developed immediately, and there were a total of 12 images on the camera. So most of the camera photos were landscapes and scenes that he had taken before he went missing. But the final photo is one that's kind of creepy. It was basically a selfie with a normal camera with a flash taken, where it's just kind of his head. It's a zoom in on his nose and eyes, and it looks as though in the background it's nighttime. So like the flash appeared and his face is really bright.
Yeah.
So they assume it was taken after he went missing at nighttime.
Okay.
So his family members said it appeared Jared had pointed the camera at his face and snapped the picture, basically. At least 70 officers, some of whom were airlifted by helicopter into the forest, and horseback riders, as well as helicopters with infrared, were deployed. In addition to that, infrared monitors were installed at a number of high points on the Saturday night in hopes of spotting the boy in the dark, but they only found deer and other animals in the monitors and the images that were produced. So that was the first time I've ever actually heard of that being used, which is a pretty cool idea, actually, if you think about it. Just give me heat signatures at night from different areas.
Yeah, I've never heard of that on a hike or a search and rescue operation before, so interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I can't imagine. I almost wonder if it was used in other ones and wasn't noted for some reason, because that seems like such an obvious idea, I guess, for it to not be used regularly. So.
Yeah, and it very well might have been used on other searches. We just don't know about it. But and maybe this search and rescue team didn't have some of the equipment, the aerial equipment, to do infrared searching at the time. So
well, they said the helicopters did have infrared on them.
Oh, okay.
So they weren't using FLIR, obviously, because that was newer, but they were using the infrared cameras from the chopper.
Interesting.
So. And I didn't even mention in the beginning, and it's a pretty big deal. We have Rick Maschek, who was actually a search and rescue worker on the ground. He was a former park ranger, was in search and rescue for a while, and now he teaches like rocket science to kids. He was explaining it a little bit to me, and it sounds impressive, and he's very dedicated to education. So he was I found him on a forum commenting on this case, and I messaged him, and he was willing to come on and speak about it. So we're going to have the firsthand account coming up too. But I wanted to get through the rest of the story, and then we'll actually go to that interview with Rick.
Okay.
So after they did that, basically over the next 2 weeks from when he went missing, as many as 3,000 people had logged over 45,000 hours scouring 50 square miles of the San Bernardino National Forest from Angeles Oaks to Whitewater Canyon. In addition to searchers on foot and on horseback, no further clues were found. So basically, Jared had vanished. They theorized that the camera could have been dropped while Jared slid down a mountain slope. So there was one thing, and I won't get into it too detailed because Rick made mention of this, that he was seen by another hiker cutting switchbacks on the way down the trail, and was told, and basically the hiker told him not to do it and to stay on the trail.
Yeah.
So
it's tempting whenever you're hiking.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest thing. It's very tempting to do because it's just so much work to walk in a zigzag up a hill.
Yeah, it's incredibly dangerous. And not only is it dangerous, Joe and I stress to leave no trace. That means staying on trail unless you actually have a backcountry permit that allows you to, some parks in the U.S. will issue backcountry permits that basically allow you to camp anywhere within the borders of the national park. Yeah. And in those instances, it's fine to go stomping around, off trail. But, a lot of parks, they want you to stay on the trail. If hundreds of people every day do stuff like this, cutting switchbacks, it destroys the park.
Yeah.
But being that he was
it causes erosion, all that stuff.
Yeah, but being that he was a 13-year-old kid, he probably didn't know any better. And
Sure.
I mean, logically, it makes sense. You could shorten your trip down the mountain by a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, it's after even doing Africa, just wanting to go in a straight line back to camp after all the work going up Kilimanjaro.
Yeah,
it's really tempting, but it's super dangerous to do that.
Yeah, especially if you got a heavy pack on your back.